is here. Now, broadcasting from the underground command post, deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
Hello, everybody. Mark Levin here. I hope you had a good weekend. Our number, 877-381-3811, 877-381-3811. It is amazing. And, you know, I don't listen to a lot of talk radio anymore because, frankly, it's giving me a headache. And it's really been dumbed down in some respects. But it is amazing what I say and how others try and incorporate it into their programs. Just listen to this show, that's all. Because we're always trying to stay ahead of the curve. I have to. I'm on at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific. Plus, my mind works differently. I really want to use this program for good, for information, to extend as far as we can. So, we've talked a lot about what Obama's going to say tomorrow. No, I don't watch his State of the Union speeches because I don't really want to get into all the seals clapping in the audience and all the commentary afterwards, like somebody has to tell me what I just heard, and on and on and on. And it's depressing. Obama's depressing. His speeches are depressing. It's like, let me tell you how I'm going to destroy the country, destroy your livelihood, destroy our sovereignty. Well, why do you need to listen to that? You already know we have to fight it. But there's a number of ways I want to address this today, given that tomorrow is the State of Confusion speech. And by the way, I've noticed, and I'm quite pleased about this, that people are recognizing that Obama has in fact and is in fact conducting a coup in the way that he's attacking our Constitution and our economic system. A coup. So I want to salute those who are even using the word now. This is what I said the other week about that, as a matter of fact. Mr. Producer, cut 12, go. He's just announced that he is going to assume lawmaking powers. He does not recognize the majority in the House of Representatives. I don't know how much more clearly he can say it. You know what this is, folks? You know what this is? This is a gradual, quiet coup. That's what's taking place. It's gradual. It's quiet in the sense that it's nonviolent, but it's a coup. And I'm back live. I've said that over the years, and I'm not going to bore you with going back, but it is a coup. And he's using the police powers of the country against us, against innocent, law-abiding, tax-paying American citizens. And so I've explained, at least over the last 6 to 8 months, that there are elements of police statism that's going on now in this country. There's no question about it. Look, there's nothing noble or virtuous about pretending otherwise. A fact is a fact. But back to this equality stuff and how Democrats supposedly represent women and so forth. First, on the equality issue, I thought it'd be another good time to hear from the great Lady Thatcher, the late great Prime Minister of Britain, when she was on the floor of the Parliament, which I watch all the time. It's wonderful. In 1990, November 1990, taking on a liberal leader in the House of Commons. But listen very carefully to this. I've played this before, but it's apropos now, too. Cut 13, go.
I give way to the honourable gentleman.
There is no doubt that the Prime Minister has in many ways achieved substantial success. There is one statistic that I understand is not, however, challengeable, and that is that over her 11 years, the gap between the richest 10% and the poorest 10% in this country has widened substantially.
That's right.
How can she say at the end of her chapter of British politics that she can justify many people in a constituency such as mine being relatively much poorer off, much less well housed, and much less well provided than it was in 1979. Surely she accepts that is not a record that she or any Prime Minister can be proud of.
Now let's stop right here. So this argument is made by the radical left all the time about income inequality. And by the way, it's their policies that create more income inequality than anything else. And then they drag us all into this radical egalitarianism where we're all back in the rice fields together, shoulder to shoulder, barefoot with our little baskets. But in any event, what bothers me is how Republicans are so inept at responding to these things. Here's Thatcher. Go.
Speaker, all levels of income are better off than they were in 1979. But what the honourable member is saying is that he would rather the poor were poorer, provided the rich were less rich. That way you will never create the wealth for better social services as we have. And what a policy! Yes, he would rather have the poor poorer, provided the rich were less rich. That is a liberal policy. Yes, it came out, he didn't intend it to, but he did. I give way to the honourable gentleman.
I'm extremely grateful. The Prime Minister is aware that I detest every single one of her domestic policies and I've never had that.
And I think that the honourable gentleman knows that I have the same contempt for his socialist policies as the people of East Europe who have experienced it have it for theirs. I think I must have hit the right nail on the head when I pointed out that the logic of those policies are they'd rather have the poor poorer. Once they start to talk about the gap, they'd rather the gap was that. Down here. That. Not that. But that. So long as the gap is smaller, they'd rather have the poor poorer. You do not create wealth and opportunity that way. You do not create a property-owning democracy that way.
Brilliant. And yet so plain-spoken and straightforward. Brilliant. Can you ever imagine a John Boehner or Mitch McConnell speaking like that? It's laughable. Or virtually any of these Republicans, for that matter. Or virtually any of these talk show hosts, for that matter. I went back and looked a little bit at the actual Barack Obama record. Because they've got now the income gap, inequality, they stand for women, they stand for minorities. And this comes up all the time. And the idea that Republicans can't respond with facts and logic and experience is so frustrating to somebody like me and many of you. Writing in Forbes, our buddy Peter Ferrara, who's a brilliant man, and he worked in the Reagan administration, he compared, a few months back, Obama's record in his first term as applies to women and minorities to the left wing's hated Ronald Reagan. I want you to listen to this. He points out that real median weekly incomes for females rose 32.1% in Reagan's first term compared to 6.6% in Obama's first term. Do Republicans not point this out, ladies and gentlemen, the establishment Republicans, because, let's be honest, they really have contempt for Reagan? Because they beat his hero, their hero? That would be other wimpy Republicans. Employment of women in Reagan's first term rose 4,460,000, while women suffered a net loss of 354,000 jobs during Obama's first term. Conversely, the number of women not in the workforce, that is, who dropped out of the workforce in his first term, for Obama, 4,458,000. In Reagan's first term, 345,000. That's more than a factor of 10. Now, while I'm at it, let's talk about African Americans. More than 3 times as many jobs were created for African American women in Reagan's first term compared to Obama's first term, even though the population was much larger in Obama's first term. Jobs for African American women rose by 15.1% in Reagan's first term compared to 2.6% in Obama's first term. And remember what Reagan inherited when he came into office. Do you remember? Double-digit inflation, double-digit interest rates, soon double-digit unemployment. Real median family incomes had been falling. This is the Carter-Obama model for several years. Poverty rates were rising, and I could go on and on and on. It was the worst condition since the Great Depression, the worst recession ever. It didn't occur before Obama. It occurred under Carter. Teenage female African Americans. That kind of hits all the nails, doesn't it? Employed fell by 19.1% in Obama's first term, compared to a decline of just 1.5% in Reagan's first term. The unemployment rate for teenage female African Americans rose by 5.7 percentage points in Obama's first term, compared to 1.1 points in Reagan's first term. And what this is, it's more than comparing Reagan to Obama. It's comparing capitalism to socialism. Yet the labor force participation rate for teenage female African Americans rose by 2.5 percentage points in Reagan's first term, and it fell by 2.6 percentage points in Obama's first term. The poverty rate soars under Obama to 16.1%, higher than when the war on poverty began, and that covers primarily women. Child poverty has soared as well to over 20%, with 8 million American children growing up in poverty. The Census Bureau reports more Americans in poverty today than at any time in more than half a century since the census has been tracking poverty, at almost 50 million. And again, that's mostly women and their children. Why the hell can't these Republicans fight these guys? It's just so frustrating. I'm not done. Real median household income has declined by nearly 8% in Obama's first term, which is equivalent to the middle class losing 1 month's pay every year. Income for the bottom 20% of income earners has declined by a similar amount. Income has been rising under Obama only for the top 20%, which is why so-called income inequality has perversely been rising under Obama. By contrast, Reagan's first term, the decline in average and low incomes, which had persisted for years when he entered office, was reversed, and incomes for every income quintile, from the top 20% to the bottom 20%, turned around and rose for several years. Who's given the response to Obama? I don't even know. Do they know how to respond to Obama? Do they know how to respond to Marxist socialism? Do they know how to speak up about private property and liberty and free enterprise? No, they don't, and that's the damn problem. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
Well, let me be clear about this. Let me help out some of these Republicans here. And, of course, tomorrow's hosts who may want to cherry-pick some of this. This president has created more poverty, more economic inequality, more economic dislocation, more crushing debt than any president in modern American history, including Jimmy Carter and Herbert Hoover. This president has set back the economic progress of women more than any modern president. This president has set back the economic progress of minorities, including African Americans, more than any modern president. This president has set back economic opportunity for our young people, our children and our grandchildren, more than any modern president, because he has embraced the most ideological, the most radical form of economics. A system that cannot work, a system that will not work, a system that is impossible. He's spreading misery, he's spreading destitution, and he's spreading poverty. This is not the America that the framers established. This is not the America that we were born into, each and every one of us. And because he's increasingly frustrated by his own incompetence and failure, what is he doing? He's dividing this nation, he's balkanizing this nation along every conceivable route that he can find. Whether it's religious, whether it's economic, whether it's race, whether it's age, whether it's income, whether it's religion. And he's seizing more and more power as he panics, as he becomes desperate, as imperial minds do. Yes, he's an imperial president. And just as I said that this president has been conducting a sure, gradual coup, which is now being picked up, he's also an imperial president, which is also now being understood. He's changing our system of government. He's destroying our economic system. He's nationalizing businesses and industries through the front door and through the back door. Do you know they have over 6,000 regulations and rules that they're preparing to unleash on us? Do you know that he's put out the word to his cabinet, to his agency heads, and to everybody in the federal government that this is their time, that come hell or high water, by 2016 when he leaves office, he wants thousands and thousands of regulations pouring out of the EPA, the Ag Department, the Education Department, the Energy Department, Interior, and all the rest. This man is a one-man wrecking ball. That's exactly what he is. He wants to talk about inequality. We want to talk about liberty. And it is liberty that we need to talk about. More when I return.
Mark Levin, the cure for the common liberal. Talk to Mark now at 877-381-3811.
Now, of course, we've never, ever discussed family values on this program. Mr. Producer, how long about it? All the 12 years, 11 years I've been on there, I don't think I've ever discussed family values, have I? I've never discussed same-sex marriage and prayer in school and abortion and the litigation my group's involved in. And, of course, I never endorsed Rick Santorum a couple of years ago. I just never do these things, do I, Mr. Producer? Too damn many schmucks in this business. All right, let me continue. Now, you know the Obama record. I just told you it. You won't hear it from a single Republican. You know what Thatcher had to say about socialists? She eviscerated several in the House of Commons. And she did it without giving it much thought. And you know the Reagan record compared to the disastrous Obama record. Now I want you to tell you a little bit more from a philosophical point of view. From Alexis de Tocqueville. Now we're fleet of foot here. We, you, I, so we're going to keep moving. But this is really what Obama's all about. Alexis de Tocqueville. He could see Obama and his ilk. He said and wrote in Democracy in America that the species of oppression by which democratic nations are menaced is unlike anything that ever before existed in the world. Our contemporaries will find no prototype of it in their memories. And I seek in vain for an expression that will accurately convey the whole of the idea I have formed of it, The old words despotism and tyranny are inappropriate. That's why I created the word called Ameritopia. But moving on. The thing itself is new, and since I cannot name it, I must attempt to define it. Now tell me if this isn't what's going on in this country today. This is de Tocqueville. I seek to trace the novel features under which despotism may appear in the world. The first thing that strikes the observation is an innumerable multitude of men, all equal and alike, incessantly endeavoring to procure the petty and paltry pleasures with which they glut their lives. You know, sporting events, movies, iPhones. Each of them living apart is as a stranger to the fate of all the rest. His children and his private friends constitute to him the whole of mankind. As for the rest of his fellow citizens, he is close to them, but he does not see them. He touches them, but he does not feel them. He exists only in himself and for himself alone, and if his kindred still remain to him, he may be said at any rate to have lost his country. Above this race of men stands an immense and tutelary power, which takes upon itself alone to secure their gratifications and to watch over their fate. That power is absolute, minute, regular, provident, and mild. It would be like the authority of a parent if, like that authority, its object was to prepare men for manhood. But it seeks, on the contrary, to keep them in perpetual childhood. It is well content that the people should rejoice, provided they think of nothing but rejoicing. For their happiness such a government willingly labors, but it chooses to be the sole agent and the only arbiter of that happiness. It provides for their security, foresees and supplies their necessities, facilitates their pleasures, manages their principal concerns, directs their energy, regulates the descent of property, and subdivides their inheritances. What remains but to spare them all the care of thinking and all the trouble of living? Thus, it every day renders the exercise of the free agency of man less useful and less frequent. It circumscribes the will within a narrow range and gradually robs a man of all the uses of himself. The principle of equality has prepared men for these things. It has predisposed men to endure them and often to look on them as benefits. Absolute genius. He went on. After having thus successfully taken each member of the community in its powerful grasp and fashioned him at will, the supreme power then extends its arm over the whole community. It covers the surface of society with a network of small, complicated rules, minute and uniform, through which the most original minds and the most energetic characters cannot penetrate to rise above the crowd. The will of man is not shattered, but softened, bent, and guided. Men are seldom forced by it to act, but they are constantly restrained from acting. Such a power does not destroy, but it prevents existence. It doesn't tyrannize, but it compresses, enervates, extinguishes, and stupefies a people, till each nation is reduced to nothing better than a flock of timid and industrious animals, of which the government is the shepherd. He went on. I've always thought that servitude of the regular, quiet, and gentle kind which I've just described might be combined more easily than is commonly believed with some of the outward forms of freedom, and that it might even establish itself under the wing of the sovereignty of the people. In other words, you might vote for this. Our contemporaries are constantly excited by two conflicting passions. They want to be led, and yet they wish to remain free. As they cannot destroy either the one or the other of these contrary propensities, they strive to satisfy them both at once. So they devise a sole, tutelary, and all-powerful form of government, but elected by the people. They combine the principle of centralization and that of popular sovereignty. This gives them a respite. They console themselves for being in tutelage by the reflection that they have chosen their own guardians. Every man allows himself to be put in leading strings, because he sees that it is not a person or a class of persons, but the people at large who hold the end of his chain. By this system, the people shake off their state of dependence just long enough to select their master, and then relapse into it again. A great many persons at the present day are quite contented with this sort of compromise between administrative despotism and the sovereignty of the people. And they think they've done enough for the protection of individual freedom when they have surrendered it to the power of the nation at large. This does not satisfy me. The nature of him I am to obey signifies less to me than the fact of extorted obedience. I do not deny, however, that a constitution of this kind appears to me to be infinitely preferable to one which, after having concentrated all the powers of government, should vest them in the hands of an irresponsible person or body of persons. Of all the forms that democratic despotism can assume, the latter assuredly would be the worst. He's talking about their fascism, as we call it today. When the sovereign is elective or narrowly watched by a legislature which is really elective and independent, the oppression that he exercises over individuals is sometimes greater, but it is always less degrading, because every man, when he is oppressed and disarmed, may still imagine that while he yields obedience, it is to himself he yields it, and that it is to one of his own inclinations that all the rest give away. In other words, you fool yourself into believing you're free. In like manner, I can understand that when the sovereign represents the nation and is dependent upon the people, the rights and the power of which every citizen is deprived serve not only the head of the state, but the state itself, and that private persons derive some return from the sacrifice of their independence which they have made to the public. To create a representation of the people in every centralized country is therefore to diminish the evil that extreme centralization may produce, but not to get rid of it. Amazing. I admit that by this means room is left for the intervention of individuals in the more important affairs, but it is not the less suppressed in the smaller and more private ones. It must not be forgotten that it is especially dangerous to enslave men in the minor details of life. For my own part, I should be inclined to think freedom less necessary in great things than in little ones, if it were possible to be secure of the one without possessing the other. Subjection in minor affairs breaks out every day. This is what I talk about, the ubiquitous federal government. Telling you how much water you can use, how much heat you can have, what the electricity price will be, whether your toaster is approved by the government, on and on and on and on. Subjection in minor affairs breaks out every day and is felt by the whole community indiscriminately. It does not drive men to resistance, but it crosses them at every turn till they are led to surrender the exercise of their own free will. Thus their spirit is gradually broken and their character enervated, whereas that obedience, which is exacted on a few important but rare occasions, only exhibits servitude at certain intervals and throws the burden of it upon a small number of men. It is in vain to summon a people have been rendered so dependent on the central power to choose from time to time the representatives of that power. In other words, you vote, as he said, for your own guardians, in essence. And remember, we talked about the book Brave New World last week, where Huxley was talking about, oh, we'll call it democracy. Oh, we'll have elections. Oh, we'll call it representation. We'll call it those things, but it isn't those things. These elections, he says, this rare and brief exercise of their free choice, however important it may be, will not prevent them from gradually losing the faculties of thinking, feeling, and acting for themselves, and thus gradually falling below the level of humanity. I add that they will soon become incapable of exercising the great and only privilege which remains to them. The democratic nations that have introduced freedom into their political constitution at the very time when they were augmenting the despotism of their administrative constitution have been led into strange paradoxes. To manage those minor affairs in which good sense is all that is wanted, the people are held to be unequal to the task. But when the government of the country is at stake, the people are invested with the immense powers. They are alternately made the playthings of their ruler and his masters, more than kings and less than men. And after having exhausted all the different modes of election, without finding one to suit their purpose, they are still amazed and still bent on seeking further, as if the evil they notice did not originate in the constitution of the country far more than that of the electoral body. The Constitution, he doesn't mean a constitutional document. He means the Constitution, the gut, the soul, the heart of the nation. He's describing what's becoming of America. I use much of that quote in Liberty and Tyranny, which is almost 5 years old. When you listen to Obama tomorrow, as many of you will, I will not. We will have many good clips from it. It comes on after this program ends, if this program is running live on your affiliate. You will notice all the things we've just discussed. And you can be able to think about them while you're listening to this guy go on and on and on, drone on and on and on about himself, about how he needs to assume more power, how he's compassionate, how he needs to provide you with your basics, your needs, your education, your food, your housing, how he, the great Obama, is going to eliminate inequality when in fact, as pointed out by Peter Ferraro in his prior piece that I read to you, he's created more economic dislocation than any modern president, particularly when you compare him to Reagan's remarkable recovery because he embraced capitalism, whereas Obama embraces Marxist socialism. When he talks about the rights of women, just remember this. This man has done more to destroy the economic condition of women than any modern president. When he talks about the rights and the equality of minorities, particularly blacks, you remember, this man has done more to set back blacks economically in this nation than any modern president. When he talks about the youth of this nation, the future, you remember that this president has done more to undermine those folks, our children and grandchildren, than any modern president. And remember one other thing. He will continue to demand more authority, more power, not granted to him under our Constitution, in order to resolve all these things. You remember, because